Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
All systems go.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, for over 25 years, our guest has helped over 600 stuck souls adjust to life after death, specifically those who have experienced what he calls interrupted death experiences. We often hear stories, theories, and beliefs about what happens when we leave this earthly realm, but today, we will learn more about this unique and deeply compassionate perspective. All this plus more. Please welcome new friend and first-time guest, Father Nathan Castle. Father Nathan, welcome to Let's Find Out.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, of course. I've been reading your bio for quite a while now, and my word, there is so much to cover here, and I'm going to do my best to do it in the amount of time that we have. And it's one of those things where I always like to ask the guests of how they wind up in the journey that they're at. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to begin to life before you got your calling, before you became a priest. How was that life for you?
Well, I was ordained at 29 years old. I'm 69 now. I entered seminary at 22 after finishing an undergraduate degree. But even as a little kid, I was raised in a Catholic home, and I was taught about the universe and my place in it. And I always had a sense that life is short. Make up your mind what you're going to do, make your impact. And I always wanted to do whatever I thought would be the most important thing I could do. And I really do believe in the fundamentals of the way that my faith understands the universe and our place in it. And so being a priest was just was the right fit.
And touching on that, because when you go to seminary, you do your studies, you have to do it in different languages, right?
Well, mine was in English, but the biblical languages are Hebrew and Greek. I studied some Greek so that I'd be a little better at that. But no, I took a lot of Spanish classes and never really learned it. I live in a place that has a lot of Spanish spoken. I can read signs, and you know how you can read things because it doesn't go by so fast. It's harder to listen to people talk and stay in a conversation. But no, I'm not all that good at language, to tell you the truth.
No,
I love words, and I love etymology of words, but only in English, really.
No, and I completely understand. Back when I was in school, very, very long time ago, there was a courses that they taught French, German, and I could actually read some of it and speak some of it, but I could never have a full-on conversation. But I can read a little bit. But so the reason I asked about your studies and your training during this time, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but the type of subject you discuss now, is that something that's really part of this study? Because it's my understanding it's probably something, I'm not going to say is controversial, but it's a little bit out of the norm.
You're talking about life after death?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's Easter morning. It's really fundamental to Christian faith that there's a phrase called the Easter proclamation, which is essentially what would be written on an Easter card. He is risen, or Jesus is risen from the dead. The idea that human people live in a body as mortals for a time, and then we leave the body and live on afterwards. That's really basic and fundamental. So even though the particular way that my ministry has progressed over time is unusual and, as you said, controversial, I think it's also at the same time very basic.
Yes. And well, the reason I ask, because it depends on where you fall. Now, I'm more on the Protestant side. I went to Catholic school because where I lived in Puerto Rico, it was all mostly private schools, all Catholic schools.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got to the States later in life, I started going to a Pentecostal church and then later non-denominational. Life after death, we all have something in common. And for some, it's a very uncomfortable subject. depending on where you fall, some believe purgatory, where some people you're talking about stuck souls. Others believe, is once appointed for a man to die. After this, the judgment, like the judgment happens immediately after.
Yes.
Uh, sometimes I'm not really. Sometimes when I think I know what's going to happen, at the same time I really don't know, and it's one of those mysteries that I hope to learn. Eventually, I will. Of course, we all do. With the stuck souls and what's going on there that's keeping them stuck? Have they had such a traumatic experience that they're not ready to let go of that part and move forward?
Yeah, I used the phrase stuck souls in the subtitle of the first of my 3 Afterlife Interrupted books that came out in 2018 because it felt like the souls that I was dealing with had all been through trauma, and they felt like they were spinning their wheels. They had formed some idea about how they died, why they died, whose fault it was, guilt of their own or something that had them just spinning their wheels, and they needed to change their mind about something in order to move along. And so, but then later I discovered that many of the ones that my prayer partners and I deal with, they have in common that they went through trauma either at the time of their death, because it was a traffic accident or a plane crash or a suicide or something frightening. But we also learned that sometimes the people we were helping had had a trauma earlier in their life that they kind of hid and never got over, and maybe just limped along. You might know somebody that's been through something that kind of broke them and they're still here. And so sometimes we deal with people like that. They might have died peacefully in their sleep, but interiorly they weren't at peace and they're dealing with something in the afterlife that needs to be dealt with. That's all.
And if it's themselves keeping it stuck, so it's not. And I hate to use generic terms. It's not some sort of plan from a spirit keeping them here on Earth, keeping them from moving on. Is actually these souls themselves that are keeping themselves in neutral.
You could say that. Sometimes it's, sometimes people will form an idea about themselves or something that's happened to them, and it becomes their truth. And they might have to say that stubborn phrase, "That's my story and I'm sticking to it." But when people use that phrase, they usually know that there's some dishonesty in it. It doesn't matter. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. And we can fool ourselves. And sometimes people believe something about themselves that's not true. And there comes a time here or hereafter where that has to be brought into the light.
And during what time in your life or during your ministry did you come to realize that there are stuck souls that need help crossing over? And how do they communicate with you? Does this happen after you went through your training, or is it something you've been able to kind of tap into most of your life?
Yeah, Diego, let me answer that in two parts. Part of it was being raised in a practicing Catholic Christian home where everybody around me took seriously the idea that we are that we have a family on earth and a family in heaven, and that we live kind of in both of those places at once. That my mom would say when I was really small, at the end of the evening, go put your pajamas on and brush your teeth, and I'll be in a minute to help you with your prayers. And then we would bless people, and even before I could form my own thoughts, I would repeat after her, and we would bless different people. And then over time, both of my dad's sisters became nuns, and they belonged to the same order that I did, and they were both first grade teachers. So they were very adept in teaching the faith to children. And we were taught that when we would die, we would go to one of three places: heaven, hell, or purgatory. And that it seemed to me that it was sort of like nation states in the skies, like Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. There were these like places you could go, but it seemed to me that most people weren't perfect and most people weren't horrible. That it seemed to me the most populous one would be the one in the middle, and it was purgatory was understood to be sort of like the lobby of heaven. It wasn't exactly its own thing perpetually. It was a place to be cleansed, which is what purge means, to get rid of. Cleaning out your garage might be purging some of your stuff and having a yard sale, getting rid of
Right.
things that are unnecessary. And in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it uses the idea of attachment, like Velcro, another metaphor of something attached to you that's not really you, that really needs to be released so that you can be more authentically whole in yourself. Anyway, I was taught really young that there were these people that would be in this purgatory place, and we could pray for them to advance and improve and even get into heaven. And one of my aunts taught me right before my first communion, she said, listen to me, this is very important. God hears everybody's prayers, but the prayers of children go straight to God's heart. You won't be a child for very long, so don't waste your short childhood. While you're a child, you have a superpower. So pray for everyone and everything you can think of. And then I was also taught that because only the Catholics believed in purgatory, none of the other people knew to pray for their loved ones who had died. And so they were kind of left out. And so we used to get a newspaper in the morning and one at night, and they both had a full page of pictures of people that had died with little stories about them. And if you read all the way to the bottom, you could see what church their service was going to be at. And in the 60s, when I was growing up, everybody had a funeral at a church. Nobody went to the beach or a gazebo or the lake or anything like that. Everybody, even if you'd never attended church, you still had a funeral inside of one. And so I'd read to the bottom, and if they weren't Catholic, I would pray for them. And I would take the newspaper to bed with me and pray for the ones. And then one of my aunts said, if yours was the prayer that sprung somebody from purgatory into heaven, you would have a friend for all eternity. So I thought that sounded like a really good deal. So I would pray for the low-hanging fruit. Diego, if it was you, if you were one aggravating prayer from heaven, I would pray for whoever's at the head of the line and nobody's praying for them, and my prayer would push you over the edge. And then I thought of, you ever go to the bank or the grocery store and find out there's only one or two tellers or checkers and everybody's waiting in line?
Every time.
And so, you know how like in a bank lobby, they'll have those zigzaggedy ropes that go back and forth. I figured it would be orderly because God created order on page 1 of the Bible. He didn't create a chaotic mess. Everything's organized. So I figured purgatory would have to be organized so everybody would be in line in an orderly way. And I would just pray for one after the other as I was falling asleep. And then years later, when I was in my early 40s, I was ordained at 29. So I'd been a priest more than 10 years by that time. That's when this other thing started happening. And people began to come in a dream about once a week and show me a violent death that did not feel like, well, it wasn't my material, nor was it a nightmare. It was kind of buffered. So I would see the car crash or the shooting or the drowning or whatever it was, but something about the way they told it kept me safe, and I wasn't being, scared out of sleep. That's how that's how they began, coming in a dream.
And with this experience, is anybody else that you know has this gift, or has it been just you so far?
No. In fact, I've been on. My first book on this topic came out in 2018. So now, what is that? 7 years ago. And I'm a guest on a lot of podcasts, as I'm your guest today, and I have one of my own. And as I began to go public with this information, lots of people have come forward saying, well, it's not exactly like yours, but here's how it works for me. There's lots of people and the Greeks called it psychopomp. The ancient Greeks had a word for it. And I've met other people who have meditative practices. One lady told me that she helps people cross while she quilts. Somehow quilting in her quilting room gets her all calm, and apparently something about quilts has different levels of fabrics, and something about the process of doing that for her was a way that she could get into this spirit zone that helped this happen. So no, I'm certainly not the only one.
And when you have this communication and you wake up from your dream,
Yeah,
do you write these down immediately, like in a journal,
I do.
or?
I have a journal on the coffee table right behind me. I keep it on the nightstand. I learned that otherwise, if I didn't keep it on the nightstand, I'd have to get up in the night and stumble around looking for something to write on and a pen and all that. And then I wanted to be able to go back to sleep, so I didn't want to have to turn on lights, and I can just kind of put the lamp on the nightstand, quickly write down, and I'm praying to the person while that's going on. Dreams can dissolve pretty quickly, so I would try to get them on paper as fast as I could. And then I used to think that I needed to be with prayer partners in person in order to have the assistance that I need. But then when COVID happened and we couldn't be together, and when everybody started learning how to do Zoom, even people who thought they'd break the computer if they touched it, a lot of elderly people learned how to do Zoom so they could be in touch with their grandkids and all that. Once we learned that wasn't so hard, I just did 2 this morning. I had different prayer partners in different parts of the country, and we just schedule appointments like we would for anything else. And I try not to let more than a few weeks pass between when a dream comes and when we have the session that helps the person move along. They don't seem to be annoyed if they're made to wait a little bit. They're kept busy with something productive.
And with these individuals you have contact with, and forgive the question, because it's going to sound silly to you, I'm sure you've been asked 1,000 times. Are these strictly people in this country, or is this from around the world?
No, I'd say I've only lived in the United States. I think you said that you were from Puerto Rico originally. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I visited there. My sister used to live there, and I've done some international travel, but and I've only lived in the U.S. But normally, I can feel in the context something about the texture of the dream that suggests I think I'm in the Middle East, or I think this was in a war zone, or maybe I'm in South America, or whatever. So I would say less than 10% of them are outside the U.S., but those still roll around regularly.
And have any of them been people that you've known?
No, there was one long time ago that was a friend of mine whose husband had taken his life before I had met her, showed up and helped him along a little bit. That's the closest. But no, the rest have all been people that I didn't know. Although having done this work with them, it's very personal. You might not spend very much time with them, but I've also been a pastoral counselor much of my life, and somebody might walk into your office and then within the first 10 minutes, they're telling you their secrets. And so it can create a bond, really a strong bond quickly, moving through their precious material. So, but no, it's not people that I have known. Mostly it's people I meet along the way. Although some of them, they stay in your heart, and then you kind of have afterlife friends because you've been through this together. And then sometimes people that we helped years ago show up to help somebody else. They kind of turn back around the way that we do here. A lot of, well, like in AA, there's a lot of people that are no longer, they might still call themselves recovering alcoholic, but they're not drunk anymore. And now they're helping somebody that's maybe on their way to sobriety. It's a little bit like that. People who have been through a thing can circle back around and be helpful to help the next guy.
Right, because they could definitely relate while they were here on Earth, the struggles they were going through with that particular struggle in their life. And with a follow-up on this one, in talking about helping these stuck souls, is there any help from, I want to say, angels, and what is their part in this? Because I'm sure depending on what designation they have, what their duties are, one would assume that maybe angels have something to do with this in helping souls as well.
They do, and I'm a Catholic priest and a Christian, but even when I was a child, I understood that to be very broadly defined. Even the word Catholic means universal, and uni, the prefix in universal, means one. And Jesus wasn't conventionally religious. He was thrown out of his synagogues, and he wasn't welcome at the Jerusalem temple. It was always trouble when he went there. So people might think of Jesus as a very religious guy, except in his own time and place, he went about his life a lot differently than a lot of conventionally religious people did. I think what he did was just love across boundaries, and sometimes people objected that he didn't observe the boundaries that they wanted him to. you don't know, you shouldn't talk with that woman, or you shouldn't talk with those Samaritans, or whatever. And so anyway, in the work that we do, it didn't surprise me at all that people that don't go to church, or people of other faiths, Muslims, Hindus, none of the above, show up, because they die too. Death is very ecumenical. All kinds of people die and survive their deaths. And I'm really not writing religious books. I record everything on my iPhone. So all of our sessions are recorded and transcribed. And I try to give the reader of my books a kind of fly on the wall sense of being in the room at the time, what it might have been like to be in the middle of this movement. But I don't think I answered your question about angels. You asked about angels, didn't you?
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. I yesterday on our Catholic calendar was the Feast of the Guardian Angels. Everybody has one, whether you believe you have an angel or not, and you just do. And they're always there to help, and they're like having your own Secret Service agent all the way from the womb to the present. And they know that they were guarding a mortal, and so one day you die. And some people die of things that are violent, and that's above their pay grade. They're not. It's not up to them to control all these things, but they stay with us and love us. And very often the guardian will know. By the time they come to us, they've been vetted and they're ready to move from this therapeutic level that they have needed. It's like being the discharge staff at a medical center. You might not be a picture of health, but you might be able to get out of the wheelchair and walk to the car. You don't need to be here anymore. You need to be someplace else that'll be better for you anyway. And so we're kind of there at the door helping them out, and they're vetted. So we know that they're ready. They don't need to have their arm twisted, or they don't need to be persuaded. They just need a little listening to, a little help. Well, ask the guardians to come on first, because most people have never used another person's voice before. And that's part of the process. They need to be invited into me to use my voice. And so I don't do that indiscriminately. We first pray protected prayer. I use St. Michael, well, the divine persons, the Father, the Creator, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, St. Michael the Archangel, Mary, Mother of Jesus, the St. Dominic, the patron of the order I belong to, different ones. We make sure that we're held safe. Do you have kids?
I have a stepdaughter.
Well, people that have to raise young children need to teach them both to be trusting and to be wary of stranger danger, and to do both, even at a young age. And so I do believe there are bad actors in the world that I need to keep myself and my partners safe from. But I don't need to be frightened in inactivity. All I need to do is do a basic protection and then get busy. So I asked the guardian to come in, and they're really sweet. They're really funny. They've gotten used to the way that we operate, and so they conform to our style. And they almost always pick a name that's a nickname for the day that kind of somehow matches what's going on. One recently, in fact, it was this morning, a guy died because an 18-wheeler crossed the center line and he hit it head on. And the guardian angel came on and called himself Angel Mac.
Oh, okay.
You get Mack trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that.
And the guy that he had guarded was the class clown. Even class clowns can die in a way that's tragic. And but he now healed enough from what had happened to him to try to find humor in it. So, isn't that ridiculous? Anyway, the guardians will come on first, and it acts a little bit like a mic test, just to get the tech right, make sure that we're hooked up well. And then they model it a little bit just to show the one they guard how easy it is to do. And they'll talk to my prayer partners through me. I'm co-conscious with them, but they're not really talking to me. They're talking through me. They have to use English. They have to use words that I know the meaning of. But they use my voice and they speak through, and they don't stay on the line very long. They are around 2 or 3 minutes usually. And then they'll clarify things. Like if the dream had a crowd scene. Well, are we helping the whole crowd? Are we helping one person inside of it? Sometimes dreams have a lot of symbology, and so we might need to have things explained to us a little bit for clarity. So they'll do a little bit of that, and then they'll say, "I think I've done my job. Diego, do you need anything else from me? If not, I'm going to slide off to the side, and I'll be with you in prayer. And the one that I love and guard will be next." And then the person that we're helping do the crossing comes on the line and tells us their name, and we get into a little bit of their story.
And once their duty is completed, and let's say myself, I'm ready to cross over, does this angel follow me? Go with me to be my advocate or something
Usually
like that?
there's somebody that comes for the person. For example, do you believe that you will survive your death? Will there be a you after you die?
I'm unsure. I'm supposed there's those who say it'll be me in a glorified body, still be the same consciousness, but in a different body.
All right.
Perhaps.
And do you believe that you in a different body will have reunions with people you love who've died already, if they want to see you again?
Strong possibility. If they want to see me again, I would happily accept it.
All right. Like, I think that happens a lot. And very often it's somebody that the soul that we're helping is delighted to see, because it's somebody they love and haven't been with for a number of years, perhaps. When I first started out, I used to say, you can either choose somebody ahead of time that you knew that loves you. You could take the luck of the draw, see who shows up, or we might play, who would you like to be with on a desert island? You know, if the whole world were a possibility, is there somebody that you think it would be really fun and cool to be with? And so some of those times that would oftentimes be famous people. But anymore, I've stopped doing that. It just seems that they've already thought it through, and most of them are content to just get to that point and say, I'm going to be still now and see what happens next or who shows up. And then they explain to us who's there and how they're going to move.
Awesome, man. You know, and I'll be completely honest with you. Father Nathan is, and I think I had a conversation with a prior guest a couple of years ago. You know, and I'm I'm kind of a tough guy, but I'm not a very tough guy. There are certain subjects that scare me, and death is one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I think I have it figured out, and then sometimes I'm at night, I'm like, I have nothing figured out. You know, and I'm hoping like maybe, you know, I hope I can make it, because just like anybody else, I'm not perfect. But is that one thing that always hangs over me, because I know now as I'm getting older, I'm not saying I'm racing to the grave, but I'm saying, you know, like you say, time is short, and I know it's coming. And sometimes it kind of bothers me. Is there something that for a person like me or somebody else who shares the same fears, is there something that can help us calm down a little bit with that?
Yeah, if you don't mind me, I'm a priest after all. Do you mind me getting a little religious?
100%, absolutely.
It goes back to, what do you really think is true? For example, do you believe that you are here on purpose because a creator created you?
Yes.
All right. That creator had the capacity to create you and the intelligence and the imagination to create you. Do you believe that creator is also personal? That is, can that being who created you also love you?
Yes.
All right. Do you believe that love is conditional and it's only based upon your behavior?
That's tricky, at least for me. Depending, one would say, if you've accepted Christ in your life and you're a true believer, you stand a better chance.
One way I think of it is, I just believe unconditional love. That's what it means. I will love you without condition, and I will love you. It's pretty much what people say in a marriage vow. I will love you on your worst day, on your best day, on my worst day, on my best day, sickness, health, death do us part, all of that. If you can wrap your mind around the idea of an unconditional love, and it's best if you can think of one that you actually have lived in. Has anybody ever loved you that way? Oftentimes it's a grandparent because they weren't in charge of disciplining you.
Right.
uh, Sometimes parents love unconditionally. Sometimes friends or coworkers to the extent that they are, in your heart. Anyway, if you believe that you're created by an unconditionally loving creator, that's basics of the faith. That's where I began, and I believe that I remember in first grade I was being taught by a nun, and she said, "Children, the world was pretty good before you got here. But God's so creative. God never stops creating and always wants it to be a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And the way that God chose to make it a little bit better was to make you and send you here." Um, so I've always felt that that was true. That just seemed right to me. That my job is to make the world a little bit better than I found it, and I'll be here for a while, and then you can think of it as returning home, or at least going forward and being with, I'm almost 70. I have a lot of friends on the other side. And even though I'm not so much afraid of dying as I am of lingering illness, I just prefer not to have some long, slow exit. But if that happened, I would deal with it a day at a time, like I've lived the rest of my life. Anyway, I hope the best for you. And I hope that having me on here lightens the load a little bit, and you can think maybe a more hopeful thought about the whole thing.
No, and I do. It's like anybody else. I would imagine we all, the toughest person to the least toughest person, anywhere in your life you lay in bed, and sometimes you just, I guess it's kind of like a cry for help in a way, or not that I'm asking for a sign, but sometimes I just want peace. And I
Yeah.
would hope that for everybody else, that's what they're looking for.
Well, if you know the Jesus story, he no sooner dies a gruesome death with all the people who love him the most running away and saying they never even knew him and everything. He was really abandoned in a big way, but he said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." And then when he did start showing up to them on Easter morning and the days that followed, you remember the first thing he said, his entry line every time he showed up with anybody new was, "Peace be with you." That's what they needed more than anything. They needed peace. Just calm down. I'm not here to punish. I'm not here to demand an explanation. I just want you to be at peace.
Yeah, I think also the shock of seeing him come back. He's like,
Yes.
okay, it's me. Look at me. It's me. So don't be frightened.
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes he would show them the wounds to say, "Yeah, look here. If this is my ID, it's really me. Poke your fingers in the wound if you need to." Anyway.
No, it is. I think of that daily. And things related to that. And I think that's maybe sometimes, I think the older I've gotten, the more I'm seeking him. And I think that's the purpose. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think I might be on the right path. We're in a better path than I was before. And I guess that's one of those things you also talk about on your podcast as well, called the Joyful Friar, correct?
That's right.
And how often do you record weekly? Is
I
this
do. Yeah, we do a weekly show, and the new episode drops at midnight on Tuesday, Monday going into Tuesday. Yeah, Joyful Friar is the nickname of Saint Dominic, the founder of the order I belong to, where we've been around for about 810 years, and he was known as joyful. And that when I was looking to enter seminary and religious life, I wanted something that was hopeful and joyful. And when I learned that that was his nickname, that kind of cinched the deal, and I joined this group rather than somebody else. And so I borrowed that nickname from him, and now it makes me live up to it. I've recently passed through a kind of a rough patch. I lost a friend 2 weeks ago suddenly, and he's a little 7.5 pound poodle that was healthy, and then he died in my arms. And so I've been a little sad lately. So I've been the not so joyful friar, but I won't let myself stay that way very long, because I don't want to. I feel like, I can make room. I can be sad, but I don't have to be sad 24 hours a day. I can find room for joy every day. I'll kind of push myself and demand that of myself.
And it reminds me of, I had a similar experience in January, my 14-year-old lab, and my best friend, I got him when he was 3 months old. Oh, we had greatest time ever. Well, and touching on that, and I'm sorry to ask because it hasn't been that long, with our best friends, our pets,
Yeah.
are we going to be able to also possibly reunite with them in the afterlife, or are they in a different plane of existence somewhere else?
Well, I'm a Catholic. That question was asked of Pope Francis 10 years ago when he was brand new at being Pope. A little boy in Italy, a 10-year-old, had lost his dog. His dog died, and he asked Pope Francis that, and Pope Francis spoke kind of into a live mic um, off the cuff and said, "Heaven is big enough for all God's creatures." That was his answer. And my first grade teacher again said, "Well, children, let's think this through. Isn't heaven the place where God is supposed to give you everything it would take for you to be completely happy?" "Yes, sister." "Well, if you loved your dog and your dog was part of making you completely happy, wouldn't it follow that God would have to provide it?" "Well, yeah, I suppose so, sister." And so, uh, uh, the Christian churches and the Catholic Church are like big, broad, wide, deep rivers, and some people are on the right bank and some are on the left bank, and people can live in these traditions in lots of different ways. And I, at least, am in waiting in joyful hope that I can be back with Toto. My first book. I don't know if your viewer, is this both an audio and a visual podcast?
Sometimes depends if everything goes well for me, I could do the video, but I know that you have a copy of your book on your, I'm
Well,
gonna
can
say
you?
on your list.
I'm looking. Can you see on the wall behind me? There's a picture of the dog on the
I
wall.
do see it, yes.
That's the cover of my first book, which is "And Toto Too: The Wizard of Oz is a Spiritual Adventure." And I believe that Toto, the dog in that book, is really the Christ. He's the God figure that is with them always, whether they're in Kansas or in Oz. He's with them while they're confused and while they are down on themselves, while they're struggling to meet goals, and is with them all through. And Toto is in every scene in that movie. And so Toto is my Christ figure. And so when this little dog came into my life, he didn't exactly belong to me. He belonged to my best friend, who's a friend of 45 years, who's a retired priest. And the dog needed a name. And I said, "What about Toto?" And he said, "That's perfect." So uh, Toto was on my podcast a lot um, uh, up until 2 weeks ago when he passed.
Oh, and I'm really sorry about that. I know it can be tough.
We're burying him
And
tomorrow. Tomorrow's the feast of St. Francis, the patron of animals. And we have his ashes, and we're going to bury him in the backyard at my friend's house. I live in joyful hope that I'll see him again, and I have the confidence of faith, which is what confides means, to have faith with. Um, I believe that I'll see him again, but that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily, I'm not in charge of dogma. I'm not saying that this is true for everybody always. It's just the joyful hope that I live in.
and I hope it's true as well. Maybe they're both waiting on us. They might be playing at this moment right now, looking at us on this podcast and say there they are doing their thing. And
Do you know about the Rainbow Bridge?
yes,
You ever heard of that? Um,
yes.
because Toto was on my podcast a lot, he has a lot of friends all over the world. And so I got cards and emails and Facebook things from all over the place. And a lot of them reference the Rainbow Bridge, which is a poem, I think, that came from Scotland, about our dogs waiting at the crest of the Rainbow Bridge and watching us kind of come over the hill of moving from death to new life. And they'll be there to lick your face or run toward you or whatever it is. Toto was a big dancer. When he'd hear me at the laundry room door, he'd be up on his hind legs scratching, and then I'd come in and he'd be so full of energy that he'd run all over the place and jump out on the couch and down because I was here. You know, he was a great source of unconditional love for me.
Yes, they are, and it's gonna be a beautiful day when I see my little guy again. And now for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about you, your ministry, your podcast, your books, where can they go find out?
Online, the website is my name, which is Nathan Castle. So it's Nathan Castle, Castle, Nathan-castle.com. And then, if you go on the website, up in the upper right are the icons for other social media. And so the Facebook is there. But the one that I think is most important is YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. And just about everything I do anymore is on video and archived. I do a lot of retreats for people that don't have to be Catholic or Christian to take part. They're going to get some of that because of who I am. It's what I have to offer. But I think I can often do that in ways that are inclusive of at least how people wonder about things. And so I have different like Bible study things on different books of scripture. I have different retreats that I've done. Those are on the YouTube channel. And then the books, there's 3 of them. And if you go on Amazon, they're all called Afterlife Interrupted, books 1, 2, and 3. And on there, they're in print, ebook, e-reader format, and they're also audibles that I and my prayer partners do the voicing of. So those are there, and you can sample all of those. And then I ask that if people are interested in talking with me, that they come on the website and use the contact form in it. Like when you and I contacted each other and tried to figure out when we could do a podcast, I needed to know what time zone you lived in. That's important. So I need a place and a time zone. And I ask that people not ask for me to answer questions unless they've read at least one book. Because very often they'll ask me questions that are well explained in print. So I'll say, I'd love to talk with Diego. Would you mind reading one book first or listening to one book first? When you've done that, contact me again and we'll set it up. And I prefer to talk on the phone rather than type a bunch of email. So I set up I don't do ongoing counseling with the same person, but I use the image of the tow truck driver. If you really are stuck, okay, I'll come get you out of the ditch, but I'm not going to follow you down the road. I'll have one conversation with you that might get you moving. And then if you need ongoing counsel, then go look for it. You'll find it if you look for it.
Excellent words, Father Nathan. Thank you so much for being on Let's Find Out. And I look forward to having you back next year because I know you're going to be doing a lot of great things. And I look forward to catching up with you again.
All right. I'd love that. This went by in a hurry.
Thank you, Father Nathan.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.